The transaction timestamp read 3:47 a.m., and that's when I knew my entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. I wasn't supposed to be working that night. I wasn't supposed to pull that particular audit file. I wasn't supposed to recognize the digital signature embedded in the metadata, but I did. And the moment I saw Derek Walsh's authorization code buried in a web of shell corporations and phantom accounts, something fundamental inside me shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a bone breaking under pressure it was never meant to bear. My name is Cameron Reeves, and I'm a forensic accountant. My job is finding the truth hidden in numbers, following money trails that people think they've erased, reconstructing financial crimes from digital breadcrumbs. I've sent embezzlers to prison. I've dismantled fraud schemes worth hundreds of millions. I've testified in federal cases that made national headlines, but I never imagined I'd use those skills to destroy my best friend. The irony wasn't lost on me, sitting there in my home office at 4 a.m, watching my hands shake as I stared at the screen. 15 years of friendship. 15 years of trust, so absolute it never occurred to me to question it. And all of it, every laugh, every late-night conversation, every moment I thought we were brothers in everything but blood, had been a smoke screen for the most elaborate betrayal I'd ever encountered. I should start at the beginning, not the beginning of the end, but the real beginning, back when I still believed in the permanence of friendship. I met Derek Walsh in graduate school at Northwestern. I was 24, grinding through a dual master's program in accounting and data analytics, living on coffee and ambition and the certainty that if I worked hard enough, I could build the kind of life that mattered. Derek was in the MBA program, charismatic in a way that seemed effortless, the kind of person who could walk into any room and make it feel like the party had just started. We met in a statistics seminar neither of us wanted to be in. I was the quiet guy in the back, taking meticulous notes. Derek was the one asking questions that made the professor light up, making complex concepts accessible to everyone else in the room. After the third week, he slid into the seat next to mine. "You're Reeves, right?" he said, like we'd known each other for years. "I've seen your name on the assignment rankings. You're consistently top 3. "Cameron," I corrected, though something about his confidence made me smile despite myself. "And you're Walsh. You're the one who got Professor Chen to laugh during that regression analysis lecture." "Derek!" He extended his hand. "And yeah, well, if you can't make statistics entertaining, you're not trying hard enough." That handshake felt significant somehow, though I didn't know why at the time. His grip was firm, his smile genuine. Looking back now, I wonder if he already saw me as a tool, a useful connection to cultivate. But in that moment, I just thought I was making a friend. We started studying together. Derek had the conceptual understanding, I had the technical precision. He could see the big picture, I could execute the details. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. What started as academic collaboration evolved into actual friendship, the kind where you show up unannounced at each other's apartments with beer and takeout, where you talk about your fears and ambitions at 3 a.m, where you become part of each other's lives in ways that feel permanent. "You're going to change the world, Cameron," Derek told me one night in my cramped studio apartment, both of us slightly drunk on cheap whiskey. You've got this gift for seeing patterns nobody else sees. You're gonna be the guy who takes down the corrupt billionaires, who makes sure the numbers don't lie. And you're going to
build something massive, I replied, meaning it. You've got vision. People follow you. You're going to run companies, change industries. We should do it together, he said. And the way he said it made it sound like a sacred vow. When we graduate, when we make it, we stay connected. We help each other rise. Deal? Deal. We shook on it, and I remember thinking that this was what brotherhood felt like. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. The bond that transcends blood because it's built on mutual respect, shared ambition, and genuine care. I was so fucking naive. After graduation, our paths diverged but stayed parallel. I joined Morrison and Hale, a mid-sized forensic accounting firm in Chicago that specialized in corporate fraud investigations. It was exactly what I wanted: complex cases, real impact, the satisfaction of using numbers to expose lies. Derek went into venture capital, joining a firm called Meridian Partners. He was brilliant at it.
naturally. His charisma, his strategic thinking, his ability to see potential where others saw risk. It made him successful quickly. We stayed close. Weekly dinners when our schedules allowed, regular calls. I went to his promotion celebrations, he came to my case, victory drinks. When I got engaged to Rebecca, a marketing director I'd met through mutual friends, Derek was my best man. When he started dating Vanessa, a corporate lawyer, I was the first person he introduced her to. Our lives were unfolding exactly as we'd imagined that drunk night in grad school. We were successful, respected, climbing our respective ladders. And we were doing it together, or so I believed. The warning signs were there. I just didn't see them because when you trust someone completely, you interpret everything they do through a lens of good faith. Derek started a tech company about 5 years into our careers. It was called Nexus Analytics, and the pitch was beautiful in its simplicity, using machine learning to predict market trends before they happened. He asked me to consult on the financial modeling, help structure the initial funding rounds, make sure the numbers told the story investors wanted to hear. "I need someone I can trust," he said over dinner at Gibson's, his treat. "Someone who'll tell me the truth, not just what I want to hear. This could be massive, Cameron, but only if the foundation is solid." How could I say no? This was my best friend asking for help with his dream. I spent months working on Nexus Analytics alongside my regular cases, structuring their financial projections, building their reporting systems, making sure everything was audit-proof. I didn't charge him. This was what friends did, right? Support each other. Invest in each other's success. Rebecca thought I was spreading myself too thin. "You're working 80-hour weeks," she said one night, watching me work on Nexus projections at our dining table. "When do you rest? When do we have a life?" "This is temporary," I assured her. "Derek's helping build something important. Once they're through Series A funding, I can step back." "You always say it's temporary." She wasn't wrong. But I didn't see it as a problem. I saw it as loyalty, as friendship, as doing the right thing. What I didn't see was that I was building the infrastructure Derek would later use to destroy me. Nexus Analytics took off. Derek's vision, combined with my financial architecture, created something that investors loved. They raised $12 million in their Series A, then $45 million in their Series B. Derek offered me equity, 3% of the company, as thanks for my consulting work. "You earned this," he insisted. "You helped build this. You should share in what we create." I accepted, touched by the gesture. 3% of a company valued at $150 million post-Series B meant my equity was worth roughly $4.5 million on paper. Not life-changing money yet, but a foundation. A promise of future security. "We're doing it," Derek said at the Series B celebration party, his arm around my shoulders. "Everything we talked about. We're building the life we wanted." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. The cracks started showing about 8 years into our friendship, but they were so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining things. Derek became harder to reach. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then quarterly. He was always apologetic, always blaming the demands of running a rapidly scaling company. You understand, right? You know how it is when things are moving fast. I understood, or I thought I did. Vanessa and Derek got engaged, and I was happy for them. The wedding was extravagant, a destination event in Napa Valley, everything first class. I gave a best man speech about friendship and loyalty, about how Derek was the kind of person who lifted everyone around him. People cried. Derek hugged me and said I was his brother. 2 months later, he didn't invite me to a major Nexus Analytics board meeting where they were discussing acquisition offers. I found out from a mutual friend. "Must have been an oversight," Derek said when I asked about it. "Things have been chaotic, you know how it is." But it stung. And it wasn't the last time. My equity statements from Nexus started arriving irregularly, sometimes quarterly, sometimes not for 6 months. The numbers seemed strange, dilution events I didn't remember authorizing, valuation adjustments that didn't align with their public fundraising announcements. I flagged it to Derek. "Our CFO handles that stuff now," he said, waving it off. "You know how complicated cap tables get at our scale, but don't worry, Cameron, I'm looking out for you. You're protected." I should have pushed harder. In my professional life, I would have. If a client had given me that explanation, I'd have demanded a full audit. But this was Derek, my best friend, the person I trusted more than almost anyone. So I let it go. Rebecca and I divorced after 6 years of marriage. No dramatic explosion, just the slow erosion of two people who'd grown in different directions. She wanted stability, presence, a partner who was emotionally available. I was married to my work, chasing cases that consumed me, unavailable in all the ways that mattered. "You care more about finding other people's lies than addressing your own," she said the night she left. "You can trace fraudulent transactions across continents, but you can't see that we're falling apart." She wasn't wrong. We split amicably, divided our assets, agreed to stay friendly. Derek and Vanessa took her side, which surprised me. Not actively hostile, just distant. Fewer invitations, more excuses. "Divorce is awkward," Derek explained when I mentioned it. "People feel like they have to choose. It's not personal." But it felt personal. I threw myself deeper into work. Morrison and Hale promoted me to senior director, leading their complex fraud investigations unit. I was good at my job, better than good. I'd developed a reputation for solving the unsolvable, finding evidence prosecutors thought didn't exist. My success rate in cases going to trial was 94%. I'd helped recover over $800 million in fraudulent transactions. But I was lonely. The divorce left me isolated. My parents had retired to Arizona and we talked monthly, but weren't close. I'd let most friendships atrophy during my marriage, too focused on work and my relationship with Rebecca. Derek was my constant, my anchor. Even as our interactions became less frequent, I still thought of him as my person, the one who'd be there if I really needed him. I was wrong about that too. The real unraveling began on a Tuesday. I was assigned to a new case, a potential fraud investigation at a venture capital firm called Silverton Holdings. They were suspected of inflating valuations on their portfolio companies, creating phantom growth to attract new investors in what was essentially an elaborate Ponzi scheme. My job was to audit their claimed returns, verify the legitimacy of their investment vehicles, and trace the money. I started with their public filings, building a network map of their corporate structure. Silverton had invested in dozens of companies, creating a web of interconnected entities that was clearly designed to obscure rather than clarify their actual financial position. One name caught my eye: Nexus Analytics. Silverton Holdings had led Nexus's Series C round 2 years ago, investing $30 million. That round had valued the company at $400 million. With my 3% stake, that should have meant my equity was worth $12 million. But my last statement showed a valuation of only $6 million. Curious, I dug deeper. The public announcements about Nexus's Series C didn't match the actual financial documents I was seeing in Silverton's records. The valuation was inflated, the revenue projections were fictitious, the growth metrics were manufactured. Nexus Analytics, Derek's company, the company I'd helped build, was part of an elaborate fraud. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I traced the money flow between Silverton and Nexus, I found something else. A series of consulting payments made from Nexus to a shell company called Archway Solutions, $200,000 per month for 3 years, over $7 million total. I ran the corporate filings for Archway Solutions. The entity was registered in Delaware, owned by a trust. The beneficial owner was hidden behind layers of legal structures, but the authorized signatory was listed on one obscure filing, Derek Walsh. My hands went numb. Derek had been paying himself through a shell company, taking money out of Nexus, money that should have been building company value, my equity value, and funneling it into his personal accounts. And he'd been doing it for years. I kept digging. The more I found, the worse it got. There were more shell companies, more payments, consulting fees, licensing agreements, intellectual property transfers, all mechanisms to extract cash from Nexus while making it look like legitimate business expenses. I estimated Derek had taken at least $15 million from the company over the past 4 years. But even that wasn't the full picture. I cross-referenced Nexus's cap table against my equity statements. My ownership had been diluted from 3% to 0.8% through a series of funding rounds where I'd been denied my pro rata rights, rights that should have been guaranteed by my shareholder agreement. The dilution wasn't accidental. It was systematic, deliberate. Derek had structured it so I would end up with almost nothing while he extracted millions. And then I found the final piece, the one that made everything clear. In Silverton's internal emails I had legal access to as part of the investigation, I found a message from Derek to Silverton's managing partner. It was from 3 years ago, shortly before the Series C round. Reeves' equity position. Confirmed we can execute the dilution strategy discussed. He trusts me completely, won't question the paperwork. We proceed as planned. By the time he realizes, if he ever does, his stake will be worthless, and he'll have no legal recourse. Built-in protection via the amended bylaws he signed without reading. It's handled. I read it 3 times, then 5. Then I couldn't count anymore because my vision was blurring. He'd planned this. From the beginning, or close to it, Derek had planned to steal from me. Not just the money, though that was significant, but something worse. He'd stolen my trust, weaponized my loyalty, turned my best qualities into vulnerabilities he could exploit. Every time I'd consulted for Nexus, I'd been building the infrastructure for my own betrayal. Every time I'd trusted Derek's explanations, I'd been giving him permission to rob me. Every moment of our friendship had been, at least in part, a
Long continued. I sat in my office until sunrise, staring at the evidence, feeling something fundamental break inside me. This wasn't just about money. It was about being seen as a fool by someone I loved, being used, being so thoroughly deceived that I'd helped build the mechanism of my own destruction. Derek hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen my faith in my own judgment. He'd made me complicit in my own betrayal. And he'd done it all while pretending to be my brother. The next weeks were a blur of functioning while feeling like I was watching my life from underwater. I completed the Silverton investigation. My professional obligations didn't stop just because my personal world was imploding. I documented everything, built an airtight case, handed it to the prosecutors. Silverton Holdings would be shut down. Several executives would face criminal charges. But I kept Derek's involvement quiet. Not in the official reports, but in my own separate documentation. This wasn't
something I wanted to hand to prosecutors. Not yet. This was personal. I needed to understand the full scope before I decided what to do. So I started a parallel investigation using all my professional skills, but conducting it entirely off the books. Just me, late nights, and the determination to uncover every single lie. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Derek hadn't just stolen from Nexus Analytics. He'd been running a broader scheme, using his venture capital connections to invest in companies, inflate their valuations through fraudulent means, then cash out before the truth emerged. Nexus was just one piece. There were 4 other companies where he'd executed similar strategies, extracting millions while leaving investors and early employees with worthless equity. Total take, approximately $47 million over 6 years. He'd bought a vacation home in Aspen I didn't know about, a yacht, a collection of art worth millions, all paid for with money that should have been building legitimate value, creating real success. Instead, it was a mirage, and Derek was the illusionist. I found emails between Derek and Vanessa discussing me, laughing about how easy I was to manipulate, joking about my puppy dog loyalty, planning trips funded by money stolen from Nexus, money that partially belonged to me. Cameron still hasn't noticed the cap table dilution, Derek wrote to Vanessa. Told you he'd never question it, too trusting, too busy playing hero in his fraud investigations to see he's being defrauded himself. The irony is delicious. Vanessa's response: "God, you're terrible, but effective. When are you going to tell him about the Silverton connection?" "Never." "Why would I? By the time anyone connects those dots, we'll be liquidated and gone. And Cameron's too ethical to pursue this personally. He'll be hurt, but he won't burn me. That's who he is." He was right about the hurt, wrong about everything else. I stopped sleeping, not metaphorically, literally. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Derek through this new lens of understanding. Every laugh, every confidence shared, every moment of vulnerability, it all felt contaminated now, poisoned by the knowledge that while I'd been genuine, he'd been calculating. The person I'd thought I knew didn't exist, had never existed. Derek Walsh, my best friend, was a fiction, a character he'd performed brilliantly for over a decade, while the real Derek, the one who saw me as a useful idiot, a tool to be exploited, operated behind the scenes. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, stopped answering calls from colleagues, let my apartment become a chaos of case files and evidence boards, not for Morrison and Hale cases, but for my investigation into Derek's fraud network. My therapist, I'd started seeing one after the divorce, became concerned. "Cameron, you're exhibiting signs of severe trauma. This obsession isn't healthy. Have
you considered that you might need to simply walk away, cut contact, file a civil suit, move on?" But she didn't understand. This wasn't about the money. This was about the fact that I'd built my entire adult life around a friendship that was a lie. Every decision I'd made, every sacrifice, every moment of trust, it was all built on sand. And Derek knew it. He'd counted on it. Walking away meant accepting that I was the fool he thought I was, that I'd let myself be used, betrayed, and discarded without consequence. I couldn't accept that. I started planning my response with the same methodical precision I brought to my professional investigations. This wasn't about rage or revenge in the passionate sense. It was about justice, about ensuring that Derek experienced consequences proportional to his actions. The challenge was that Derek had protected himself legally. He'd structured everything through shell companies, trusts, and legal agreements designed to make prosecution
difficult. The dilution of my equity was arguably legal, if unethical, because I'd technically signed off on the amendments. I just hadn't read them carefully because I trusted him. A civil suit would be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain. Even if I won, it would take years, and Derek had the resources to drag it out indefinitely. By the time it resolved, the money would be hidden, the evidence degraded, and justice delayed to the point of meaninglessness. No, I needed something more immediate, more certain, more devastating. I needed to do what I did professionally. Follow the money, find the crimes, build an airtight case, and hand it to people who could destroy him completely. But unlike my professional cases, this one would be personal, targeted, designed not just to expose the fraud, but to dismantle everything Derek had built, his reputation, his wealth, his freedom. I started with the simplest question. What would hurt him most? Money, obviously. Derek valued wealth above almost everything else. But beyond that, he valued status, reputation, the image of himself as a brilliant entrepreneur, a golden boy of venture capital, someone who'd risen through talent and vision rather than fraud and theft. He was proud, arrogant. He saw himself as smarter than everyone else, especially me. That pride would be his undoing. I spent the next 2 months building my case, not just documenting Derek's fraud at Nexus, but mapping his entire criminal network. Every shell company, every fraudulent transaction, every instance of wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. I was trained to find evidence that others missed, and I deployed every technique I'd learned. I subpoenaed records through official channels where I had legal authority, working them into my existing Morrison and Hale cases. I accessed publicly available databases that most people didn't know existed. I reconstructed deleted emails using metadata analysis. I traced cryptocurrency transactions through blockchain forensics. What I built was overwhelming, undeniable, a complete financial autopsy of Derek's criminal enterprise. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed the right audience, the right timing, and the right approach to ensure maximum impact. That's when I had the idea that would bring it all together. Derek was pursuing a major deal, an acquisition of Nexus Analytics by a Fortune 500 company called CoreTech Industries. The deal was valued at $800 million. If it went through, Derek stood to personally receive approximately $200 million. It would be his crowning achievement, the exit that proved he was a visionary founder who'd built something truly valuable. The deal was scheduled to close in 4 months. CoreTech was conducting extensive due diligence, but they were focused on Nexus's technology, customer base, and revenue projections. They weren't digging deep into the financial structure, the shell companies, the pattern of
extraction that I'd uncovered. They didn't know they were buying a beautifully painted facade with rot underneath. I could expose it, blow up the deal, cost Derek everything. But I wanted more than that. I wanted him to feel exactly what I'd felt. The slow realization that everything he thought was secure was actually crumbling. The dawning horror of betrayal, the helplessness of watching your life disintegrate. So I designed a strategy that would let the deal proceed almost to completion, let Derek believe he'd won, and then destroy everything at the precise moment when he had the most to lose. Phase 1 was information gathering and positioning. I contacted an attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases. I didn't mention my personal connection to Derek or Nexus. I presented myself as a forensic accountant who'd uncovered a fraud scheme during an unrelated investigation and wanted to report it to the appropriate authorities. "This is SEC territory," the attorney
said, reviewing my documentation. "Potentially FBI if you can prove wire fraud across state lines, which it looks like you can. This is significant. We're talking about multiple felonies, potentially decades in prison." "What's the timeline for an investigation if I file?" 6 months minimum, probably closer to a year. These agencies move slowly, but with evidence this comprehensive, they'll move. This is a slam dunk case. Perfect. I filed the whistleblower complaint with the SEC and the FBI, providing them with everything I'd found. But I didn't provide it all at once. I fed them information gradually, keeping them interested but slowing down their investigation. I wanted them to move, but not too quickly. I needed them to act at exactly the right moment. Phase 2 was more personal. I started attending the same industry events as Derek. Not obviously, I'd always been in adjacent circles anyway, but more deliberately. I'd see him at conferences, fundraisers, panel discussions. I'd smile and shake his hand and make small talk, watching him interact with me with casual friendliness, completely unaware that I knew everything. "Cameron, man, it's been too long. How's Morrison and Hale treating you?" "Really well. Big cases, good challenges. You know how it is." "That's great, really great. Hey, we should grab dinner soon, catch up properly." "Absolutely. Let me know when you're free." We both knew we'd never schedule it. But I enjoyed the performance. The way he could look me in the eye and lie so effortlessly. It helped me remember why I was doing this. I also reached out to other people Derek had defrauded, early employees of his various companies who'd been promised equity that never materialized, investors who'd lost money, contractors who hadn't been paid properly. I didn't reveal my full case or my intentions. I just asked questions, gathered stories, built a network of people who'd been hurt by Derek's schemes. There were dozens. He'd left a trail of victims behind him, people who'd trusted him and been betrayed. I was just one of many, though my betrayal cut deeper because of the personal relationship. These people would become witnesses when the time came. Their testimonies would add weight to the criminal case, humanize the fraud, make it harder for Derek to claim it was all just aggressive business practices. Phase 3 was the most delicate, ensuring the core tech acquisition stayed on track while positioning myself to detonate it at the optimal moment. I couldn't directly interfere with the deal. That would be obvious sabotage and potentially illegal. But I could influence the timing of the regulatory investigation. The SEC and FBI were building their case, but they were also willing to coordinate with me since I was the whistleblower and a cooperating witness. "We want to move before the acquisition closes," the FBI agent told me during one of our coordination meetings. "If the deal goes through, it complicates everything. Money gets transferred, assets get consolidated, the fraud becomes harder to unwind." "What if we let it close?" I suggested. "The fraud is already committed. Letting the deal complete doesn't change that. But it gives you more charges, securities fraud against Cortex shareholders, additional wire fraud counts, potentially charges related to fraudulent inducement in the acquisition." The agent considered this. "You're saying let him commit more crimes to make the case stronger?" "I'm saying the case is already airtight. But if Cortec completes their purchase based on fraudulent financial statements, that's additional fraud with a much higher dollar value. Bigger case, bigger penalties, more leverage for cooperation agreements from other defendants." It was technically true, though my real motivation was different. I wanted Derek to have that moment of triumph. The deal closing, the money hitting his accounts, the celebration, the certainty that he'd pulled it off before everything collapsed. The agent agreed with some conditions. We'd monitor the acquisition closely, be ready to move immediately if anything changed, and I'd provide real-time updates on the deal timeline. Deal. The next 3 months were surreal. I watched Derek's social media as he posted about Nexus's growth, about the incredible journey of building the company, about being grateful for the amazing team and supporters who made this possible. He never mentioned me. Why would he? I was just a footnote, a useful idiot from the early days who'd served his purpose and been discarded. I attended a tech industry gala where Derek was honored as Entrepreneur of the year. I sat in the audience as he gave a speech about integrity, innovation, and the importance of building companies with strong values. The audience ate it up. He received a standing ovation. Afterward, at the reception, he found me. "Cameron, didn't expect to see you here. I work in the industry," I said mildly. "Congratulations on the award." "Thanks, man. It's humbling, you know? All these years of work finally being recognized." He paused, studying me. "You doing okay? You look tired." "Just busy. You know how it is." Right. Hey, listen, I know we haven't been as close lately. Life gets crazy, but you were there at the beginning of Nexus. You helped build something special. I haven't forgotten that. The audacity was breathtaking. He was pretending to be grateful while having already stolen millions from me, while having emails that mocked my loyalty, while planning to complete an acquisition that would leave my equity virtually worthless. "I appreciate that, Derek," I said, maintaining my calm expression. "I'm proud of what you built." "We built," he corrected, hand on my shoulder. "We built it together. That matters." I smiled. "It does matter, more than you know." He didn't catch the edge in my voice. Or if he did, he dismissed it. "Why would
I be a threat?" I was Cameron Reeves, the loyal friend, the ethical accountant, the man who was too principled to pursue revenge even when betrayed. He'd miscalculated badly. The Cortec acquisition closed on a Thursday in late September. I tracked it in real time through my sources in the investment banking community. At 2:47 p.m. Eastern Time, the wire transfers completed. $800 million from Cortec to Nexus Analytics shareholders. Derek's personal payout, $197 million after taxes and fees. He posted on social media 30 minutes later a photo of himself and Vanessa with champagne glasses, caption reading, "New chapter, grateful beyond words. To everyone who believed in the vision, thank you." The comments were effusive. "Congratulations. Well-deserved inspiration. So proud." I sat in my office and felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just cold clarity about what came next. I called my FBI contact. "It's done," I said. "The acquisition closed. You can move. We'll execute the warrants tomorrow morning. You ready for this to go public?" "I've been ready for months." "Understood. And Cameron, this is going to be big. Media attention, your role as whistleblower, it might get messy. I know I'm prepared." I wasn't really, but it didn't matter. This was beyond my personal comfort now. The FBI raided Derek's office at 6 a.m. on Friday morning. Simultaneously, they executed search warrants at his home in Lincoln Park, his vacation property in Aspen, and the offices of 3 shell companies. The SEC filed emergency enforcement actions to freeze his assets. The story hit the news by 8 a.m. Tech entrepreneur arrested in $50 million fraud scheme. Nexus Analytics, founder charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. Cortec acquisition under investigation following founder's arrest. The details I'd provided, the shell companies, the inflated valuations, the
systematic theft were all there in the federal complaint now, public record. The case I'd built was unassailable. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, colleagues, former Nexus employees. I ignored them all. Instead, I went to the federal courthouse for Derek's arraignment. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched him appear in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, looking diminished in a way I'd never seen before. His attorney argued for bail. The prosecutor, who I'd briefed extensively, argued against it, citing flight risk and the extensive foreign accounts Derek had established. The judge denied bail. Derek could be held in federal detention pending trial. As they led him out, his eyes swept the courtroom and found mine. For 3 seconds, we stared at each other. I saw confusion first, then dawning realization, then something that looked like betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood up and left before the guards, took him through the door. I'd seen what I needed to see. The next weeks were chaos. The media coverage was relentless. Cortec immediately filed suit to rescind the acquisition, claiming fraudulent inducement. Other investors followed. Former Nexus employees filed a class action lawsuit. The fraud allegations expanded as more victims came forward. Derek's life collapsed in spectacular fashion. His assets were frozen, his homes seized, his reputation destroyed. Vanessa filed for divorce within a week, claiming she'd known nothing about the fraud, a claim that my evidence contradicted, but her attorney was skilled at creating plausible deniability. Industry groups revoked Derek's awards. Publications that had profiled him as a visionary founder published new pieces about the fraud. His name became synonymous with greed and deception. Everything he'd built, every achievement he was proud of, every relationship he'd cultivated, it all disintegrated. His former friends and business partners turned on him with stunning speed, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. He was alone, exactly as I'd been when I discovered his betrayal. My role as the whistleblower became public after the first week. Some people called me a hero. Others questioned my motives, suggesting it was personal rather than principled. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. "You destroyed him," my therapist said during one of our sessions. "How does that feel?" "Necessary," I said. "He committed crimes, he hurt people. I ensured there were consequences." "That's the rational explanation. What about emotionally?" I thought about it honestly. "Empty," I admitted. I thought it would feel like justice, like resolution. But it just feels hollow. He's facing what he deserves, but it doesn't undo what he did. It doesn't give me back those 15 years of friendship that weren't real. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. Revenge rarely heals the wound it's meant to address." She was right. But I didn't regret what I'd done. Derek made choices that hurt dozens of people. Stopping him, ensuring he faced consequences, that mattered, regardless of how I felt about it personally. Derek's trial began 11 months after his arrest. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the financial evidence, explaining how he'd structured the fraud, describing the systematic way he'd stolen from investors and employees. I didn't mention our personal relationship unless directly asked. This wasn't about our friendship. That was my private pain. This was about his crimes. On the second day of my testimony, during cross-examination, Derek's attorney tried to paint me as a vengeful former friend rather than a credible witness. "Isn't it true, Mr. Reeves, that you felt betrayed by my client on a personal level?" "Yes," I said simply. "And isn't it true that this entire case is motivated by that personal betrayal rather than genuine concern About financial irregularities? No, I discovered the fraud while conducting a legitimate investigation into Silverton Holdings. The personal betrayal came later, when I realized the full scope of what Mr. Walsh had done, but the crimes existed independent of my feelings about them. But you pursued this case with unusual dedication, didn't you? Going beyond your professional obligations? I pursued it with the same dedication I bring to every case. The fact that I had personal knowledge of Mr. Walsh's character and methods made me a better investigator, not a biased one. You wanted to destroy him. I paused, meeting Derek's eyes across the courtroom. He looked older, thinner, diminished by months of incarceration and the weight of the evidence against him. I wanted him to face consequences for his actions, I said carefully. Whether that constitutes destruction is a matter of perspective. From my point of view, he destroyed himself the moment he chose to commit fraud. I simply ensured that reality caught up with him. The attorney moved on, realizing he wasn't going to crack me. The verdict came back after 4 days of jury deliberation. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, 23 separate felonies. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. I read about it in the news. Derek received 32 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he might be eligible for release in his 70s, but that assumed he'd survive that long in the federal system. His attorney made a statement about planning to appeal. The prosecutors indicated they had additional charges they could file if the appeal succeeded. It was over, even if Derek couldn't accept it yet. I tried to move on with my life. Morrison and Hale promoted me to managing director. The firm's reputation had been enhanced by my role in the case, and they wanted to capitalize on the publicity. I led their complex fraud investigations division, managing a team of 15 analysts and investigators. Professionally, I was thriving. Personally, I was a wreck. I'd achieved my goal. Derek was in prison facing consequences for his crimes, but the victory felt Pyrrhic. I'd spent over a year consumed by investigation and revenge, and now that it was done, I didn't know who I was without that focus. The friendship I'd valued so much was revealed as a lie. The time I'd invested in it couldn't be recovered. The trust I'd given so freely had made me vulnerable to exploitation, and I didn't know how to trust anyone again without fearing it would be used against me. I dated occasionally but couldn't form real connections. Every relationship felt superficial, performative, like I was going through motions without genuine emotional investment. How could I trust someone enough to be vulnerable when the person I'd trusted most had betrayed me so thoroughly? My therapist suggested that I was conflating Derek's betrayal with all future relationships, that not everyone would hurt me the way he had. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, I couldn't get past the fear. "You won the battle," she said, "but you're still fighting the war inside yourself. The external revenge didn't resolve the internal damage." She was right. Again. 2 years after Derek's conviction, I received a letter from him. It had been forwarded through my attorney, who'd screened it first to ensure it wasn't threatening or inappropriate. He'd advised me not to read it, but I overruled him. The letter was handwritten, 10 pages long. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won out. "Cameron, I don't expect you to read this." I don't expect anything from you anymore, but I'm writing it anyway because you're the only person who deserves an explanation, even though I can't give you one that will make any sense. You were right about everything. The fraud, the betrayal, the calculation behind it. All of it. I can't deny it or minimize it or explain it away. I did exactly what you documented in your testimony. I stole from you, from others, from people who trusted me. I built an empire on lies and told myself I was smart for getting away with it. But you were wrong about one thing. Our friendship wasn't entirely fake. It started that way, maybe. In grad school, I saw you as someone useful, someone I could leverage, but somewhere along the way, it became real to me. You were my best friend, Cameron. The person I trusted most, the person whose opinion mattered. And I betrayed you anyway. I've had 2 years in here to think about that, to try to understand why I would destroy the one genuine relationship in my life. The best explanation I've come up with is that I'm fundamentally broken in some way. I saw your trust, your loyalty, your integrity, and instead of valuing it, I saw weakness, something to exploit. I told myself you'd never know that I could have both things, the money and the friendship, that I was smart enough to keep them separate. That belief was the biggest lie of all. Not the one I told you, but the one I told myself. When you testified against me, when I realized you'd been the one to build the case, to coordinate with the FBI, to methodically dismantle everything I'd created, I felt betrayed. Can you believe that? I actually felt betrayed by you. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but sitting in this cell, I've had to confront the truth. You didn't betray me. You held me accountable. There's a difference, even if it took me months to understand it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and I don't expect it. You owe me nothing, less than nothing. I just wanted you to know that of all the things I destroyed, all the damage I caused, losing your friendship is the one thing I genuinely regret. Not because it would have protected me from consequences, but because it was real and I threw it
away for money that's now gone and a reputation that's destroyed. You were the best person I knew, and I treated you like a mark. I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth, which is probably nothing. Derek, I read the letter 3 times. Then I burned it in my kitchen sink, watching the pages curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. It didn't matter. An apology couldn't undo the betrayal. Regret didn't absolve guilt. Understanding why someone hurt you didn't heal the wound. Derek had made his choices. I'd made mine. We'd both have to live with the consequences. 3 years after Derek's conviction, I met someone who changed my perspective on all of it. Her name was Isabel Moretti, and she was a financial crimes prosecutor I'd worked with on a major case. She was brilliant, passionate about justice, and had no patience for self-pity or emotional manipulation. We started dating cautiously. I was upfront about my history,
about Derek's betrayal, about my struggle to trust anyone. So, you're damaged goods, she said, over dinner one night, completely matter of fact. Join the club. Everyone's carrying something. That doesn't bother you? Why would it? You were betrayed by someone you trusted. That speaks to their character, not yours. What bothers me is if you use that betrayal as an excuse to never be vulnerable again. That's letting him win in a different way. It was the most clear-eyed assessment anyone had given me. No sympathy, no platitudes, just straightforward honesty. You think I'm letting him win? I think you're so focused on not being hurt again that you're hurting yourself preemptively. You're building walls so high that nobody can climb them, then wondering why you're lonely. It's the same mistake, just in reverse. You're letting fear control you instead of trust. She was right. Again, someone was right about my damage. But Isabel was different from my therapist because she wasn't just diagnosing the problem. She was challenging me to fix it. So what do? You make a choice. Either Derek's betrayal defines the rest of your life, or it's just one thing that happened to you. Either you're permanently broken, or you're someone who got hurt and is deciding how to move forward. She paused. But you have to actually decide, Cameron. You can't just drift in this limbo forever. It took time. Months of deliberately choosing vulnerability, of catching myself when I started building walls, of reminding myself that Isabel wasn't Derek and that past betrayal didn't predict future pain. The turning point came when I let myself tell her I loved her, not calculating whether it was safe, not hedging my bets, just saying it because it was true and I wanted her to know. I love you too, she said simply. Was that so hard? Terrifying, I admitted. Good. If it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be real. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, closey, friends only. No elaborate performance, just two people choosing each other with clear eyes and honest intentions. Standing at the altar, I thought briefly about Derek, about the fact that he'd been my best man at my first wedding, that I'd imagined he'd be part of all my major life moments. That loss still stung in a distant way. But I'd built something better. Not a replacement, but something genuine. A relationship based on honesty rather than performance, on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Derek had taken 15 years of my life, millions of dollars, and my ability to trust easily. But he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't destroyed my capacity for connection, even though he'd tried. He'd just made it harder. And maybe that was the real revenge, not his imprisonment, not the destruction of his reputation, but my refusal to let his betrayal define me permanently. He'd wanted me to be weak, easy to manipulate, unable to fight back. I'd proven him wrong. 5. Years after Derek's conviction, I received notification that he'd died in federal prison. Heart attack at 47, no family present, no memorial service planned. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, not closure, just acknowledgement that a chapter of my life was definitively closed. Isabel found me reading the notification in my office. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I'm okay." "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly. He's dead. It doesn't change anything that matters." She kissed my forehead and left me to my thoughts. I thought about the Cameron who'd discovered Derek's betrayal 8 years ago, the one who'd sat in his office at 4 a.m. with shaking hands, feeling like his world had shattered. That version of me had wanted Derek to suffer, to experience consequences, to understand what he'd done. He had suffered. He'd lost everything, his freedom, his wealth, his reputation, his life. The consequences had been comprehensive, but had
he understood? Had he truly grasped what he'd destroyed? I'd never know. And I'd made peace with not knowing. What I did know was this. Derek's betrayal had been real, but so was my response. I'd used my skills to ensure justice, had refused to be a passive victim, had fought back with intelligence and patience rather than rage and violence. I'd also rebuilt my life, found love again, learned to trust again carefully and wisely, built a career I was proud of, relationships that mattered, a life that felt genuine. Derek had tried to destroy me and had instead destroyed himself. I'd survived, adapted, and ultimately thrived despite what he'd done. That was victory enough. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the friendship I thought we had, the conversations, the shared dreams, the moments of genuine connection that I still believe were real, at least on my side. I've learned that you can hold two truths simultaneously. Derek betrayed me completely, and there were moments of genuine friendship between us. Both things can be true. The betrayal doesn't erase the good moments, it just recontextualizes them. I've also learned that forgiveness is more complex than I thought. I haven't forgiven Derek exactly. I can't absolve him of what he did or pretend the damage wasn't real, but I've released the anger, not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying that rage for years would have poisoned me more than it hurt him. Isabel says I'm more empathetic now than I was before, more patient with people's complexities and contradictions. Maybe that's true. Having your faith in someone completely shattered either makes you cynical or it makes you more careful about understanding people's capacity for both good and harm. I chose the latter. My work at Morrison and Hale evolved. I still investigate fraud, still help prosecutors build cases against people who hurt others through financial crimes. But I approach it differently now, with more understanding of
How betrayal damages people, how trust can be weaponized, how even smart, careful people can be deceived by those they love. I'm better at my job because of what Derek did to me. That's a strange thing to acknowledge, but it's true. I understand victims more deeply. I recognize patterns of manipulation more quickly. I build stronger cases because I know how betrayers think, how they justify their actions to themselves, how they exploit the good faith of others. Derek made me a more effective investigator. It's probably the only good thing that came from knowing him. 10 years after Derek's arrest, I was invited to speak at a conference on financial fraud. The organizers wanted me to discuss the Nexus Analytics case, how I'd built the investigation, what techniques had been most effective. I almost declined. The case was long closed, Derek was dead, and I'd moved on, but Isabel encouraged me to accept. It might help someone, she said. Other people who've been betrayed.
other investigators who need strategies. You turned something terrible into something meaningful. Share that. So I accepted. Standing in front of 300 people, walking them through the case, I realized something. I turned my worst experience into expertise that could help others. The pain Derek caused me had been transformed into knowledge I could share, strategies other investigators could use, hope for other victims of fraud. During the Q&A, someone asked, "How did you maintain objectivity given your personal relationship with the defendant?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I can't claim I was purely objective. My personal knowledge informed my investigation in ways that pure objectivity never could. I knew how Derek thought, what he valued, how he justified his actions to himself. That made me more effective, not less." Did you ever regret pursuing the case so aggressively? I thought about it honestly before answering. No, he committed serious crimes that hurt many.
People. Ensuring he faced consequences was the right thing to do, regardless of our personal history. What I regret is that the friendship I valued turned out to be largely false. But that's not the same as regretting the investigation. After the panel, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous. "Mr. Reeves, I wanted to thank you. I was defrauded by someone I trusted, my business partner. I've been afraid to pursue it because we were friends, and I didn't want to be seen as vindictive, but your case showed me that holding people accountable isn't revenge, it's justice." "I'm glad it helped," I said sincerely, "but be prepared. It's hard. Pursuing someone you cared about, even when you know they're guilty, takes a toll." Was it worth it? I considered the question. The investigation had consumed a year of my life. The emotional aftermath had taken years to process. The damage to my ability to trust had been significant and lasting, but Derek was stopped. His other victims got some measure of justice. His fraud schemes couldn't hurt anyone else, and I'd proven to myself that I wasn't the passive victim he thought I was. "Yes," I said. It was worth it. Not easy, but worth it. She thanked me and left. I watched her go, hoping she found her own justice, her own path to healing. Now, sitting in my office on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I think about everything that's happened since that morning I discovered Derek's betrayal. The investigation, the trial, the conviction, his death, the rebuilding of my life. The ledger never lies. That's what I do. Follow the numbers, find the truth they tell. Derek thought he could hide his crimes in complexity, obscure his betrayal in shell companies and legal structures. But numbers don't deceive, they reveal. He bet that I'd never look, that my trust would blind me, that I'd be too ethical or too weak to fight back, even if I found out. He was wrong on all counts. I looked, I found everything, and I fought back with every tool at my disposal. But the real ledger, the one that matters, isn't about money or legal victories. It's about what you do when someone tries to break you. Do you let them? Do you break in turn? Or do you adapt, grow, and build something better from the wreckage? I chose the latter. I'm proud of that choice. Derek Walsh was my best friend until he wasn't. He betrayed me completely. I ensured he faced consequences comprehensively. We're both different people because of those choices. He's dead, and I'm stronger. That's not the ending I would have wanted 15 years ago when I met him in that statistics class and thought I'd found a friend for life. But it's the ending we created through our choices. His choice to betray, my choice to fight back. His choice to steal and lie, my choice to expose and prosecute. His choices destroyed him, mine saved me. The ledger is balanced, the story is over, and I'm finally genuinely okay with that. Isabel walks into my office, coffee in hand. "You look contemplative," she observes. "Just thinking about old cases." "The Derek case?" I nod. She knows me well enough to read my moods, to understand when the past resurfaces. "You know what's strange?" I say. "I used to think about him every day, then every week. Now it's maybe once a month, usually when something triggers a memory. He's becoming history instead of an open wound." "That's called healing," she says gently. "I suppose it is." She sets the coffee on my desk, kisses me, and heads back to her own office. I watch her go, grateful for her patience, her understanding, her refusal to let Derek's ghost haunt our relationship. I take a sip of coffee and return to my current case, a pharmaceutical company cooking their books, hiding safety data to protect their stock price. It's complicated, sprawling, the kind of case that will take months to unravel. But I'm good at this, better than good. I find the truth in numbers. I build cases that can't be refuted. I ensure that people who hurt others face consequences. Derek taught me that in his own twisted way. He showed me how betrayal works, how trust can be weaponized, how intelligent people commit fraud while convincing themselves they're justified. He also showed me that justice is possible even when it's difficult, that accountability can be achieved even against wealthy, powerful people who think they're untouchable, that fighting back is worth it, even when the personal cost is high. I didn't want those lessons, but I learned them anyway, and I use them to help people who've been where I was, betrayed, hurting, wondering if justice is even possible. It is possible. I'm proof of that. Derek's dead. I'm alive. I'm thriving. The ledger never lies, and the numbers say I won. Not because he lost, though he did, not because I got revenge, though some might call it that, but because I refused to let his betrayal define me, because I turned pain into purpose, trauma into expertise, betrayal into a determination to help others. That's victory, the only kind that matters. I close the file on my desk and open the pharmaceutical case. There's work to do, truth to find, justice to pursue. Derek Walsh taught me how to do this job. I'm grateful for the skills, if nothing else. And I'm moving forward, always forward. The past is settled, the future is mine, the ledger is balanced, and I'm at peace.